Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 3rd special report from Gradient Investments. I'm Jeremy Bryan, Senior Portfolio Manager today, and I'm going to just talk about tariffs because we had some news over the weekend on tariffs, and there's a lot of market implications that come as a result of that. Constantly moving target at this point right now. But we'll try to give you our bearings and give us the best approach that we have right now and just what our thoughts are, what's going on, how the market's reacting, and kind of the implications. So with that said, we're going to get going here. So let's start with this, is that tariffs were announced for Mexico, Canada, and China over the weekend. 25% for Mexico and Canada, 10% for China. So why this is so impactful is obviously one, these are our neighbors for the most part, except for China, obviously. But secondarily, these are the largest U.S. trade partners. These countries combined represent 42% of our total imports in 2024. That's over 1 trillion in imports. So there's going to be a lot of effect if these were fully implemented across the board, especially 25% across the board for Mexico and Canada. Again, large trade partners. They become our largest trade partners, actually, those two countries, excuse me. So there's a lot of implications as a result of enacting these types of policies for our neighboring countries and then also for China as well. So what are the goals of the administration, at least the stated goals? I think the first and foremost stated goal we've seen thus far is that it's border security, is that especially for Mexico and Canada, there is using tariffs as a negotiation or implementation tool to pressure those administrations into increasing their border control. And that is both the flow of migrants and also illegal drugs like fentanyl. So as you all may be aware, I believe it was a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago at this point now, but Colombia was threatened. We were sending migrants back to Colombia, and they refused the airplane. And as a result, President Trump enacted a temporary tariff on Colombia that was then repealed once negotiations happened. So they're using this tool. The administration has made it pretty clear they're going to use tariffs as a tool to kind of get what they want from other countries. Whether it's a negotiation or an implementation tool is to be seen in the future. Encourage U.S. manufacturing. The administration's thought process here is that the tariffs could level the playing field for U.S. manufacturers against other countries. You know, there's this Trump 1.0 had a lot of this implementation as well in saying we want to have U.S. manufacturing be competitive around the world. Tariffs will level that playing field. Lastly, they want to add revenue to the government budget. The hope is that, for potential future tax cuts, and certainly there is a desire to probably tax cut further, both enact the personal or the income tax cuts and extend those further that were part of Trump 1.0, but also potential business tax cuts in the future. So we'll see where that goes. We don't know anything about tax policy. We don't have a concrete agenda on that yet, but there is discussions that this could add revenue to the government budget to offset some of those tax cuts in the future. So let's talk quickly about what goods are most affected. In Mexico, fruits, vegetables, spirits, and beer. So Modelo, as many of you may know, may not know, Modelo is the #1 U.S. brand at this point now, and that will face a tariff that will make that beer more expensive. And also avocados. Most of the avocados we purchase are from Mexico. In Canada, steel, lumber, grains, and potatoes. Both of these countries have more than just this, but these are the ones that probably are most predominant with regard to could be affected by tariffs. But other areas of concern, especially across the board, is vehicle production is probably the biggest one we're hearing about right now, in the effect that as vehicles are produced, especially and sold in the U.S., they cross the border many times. Many of the parts and components come from both countries. So there's an implication that vehicle production could be slowed or could just be more expensive in the future. Energy, obviously both countries are importers of energy. and oil. So from that side, but we don't know to what extent. We know that there was some level of reduction. Again, a lot of this is negotiation versus implementation. So it makes it a little difficult to say this will be affected by this amount. It's much more in just understanding that it could be affected right now, but everything is in play. And again, when you talk about 42% of our imports, it just means a lot of industries are going to be affected by these kinds of things. And so we don't know where the exact holes where those are at this point yet. That's still something we need to figure out. But there's going to be a lot of effects if these are actually implemented going forward. So let's talk about those economic implications real quick. Is that the first one? I think first and foremost, people start to think about is tariffs equal higher inflation? Potentially. It's not a certainty, but anytime you increase the price of goods, and businesses will try to pass on those costs to consumers. Some will be very successful, some will be less successful. You don't know where that equilibrium ends up lying, but what I would say is that from an inflation standpoint, this is probably more of a headwind than a tailwind to getting back to that 2%. Is that in all likelihood, if these tariffs were implemented across the board at 25%, goods will probably just be more expensive. And we have to understand that that will be a consequence of these types of actions. Trade war and global growth. Again, every action usually has a reaction, right? And so from U.S. implementing tariffs, what do other countries do to the U.S.? What do other countries do to each other? The implications of that are really difficult to know right now. And secondarily, it's really difficult to know how much that's going to affect global growth. Again, when you're talking about trade wars are usually not great for global growth, right? You usually don't accelerate into an area of uncertainty. So we have to be cautious of that, and we have to understand that that could be an implication. Again, the biggest one that I see here is that third point, is that implementation versus negotiation. What do we know that would actually take place versus what is just a negotiation tactic to try to get what we want? You're already seeing that in today's note, Mexico has actually been delayed by a month because they have agreed to some terms to delay these tariffs on. So clearly this is a negotiation tactic, but how far are we willing to let negotiation go into implementation, and how long is implementation going to place? That's the uncertainty, and that's frankly, the wild card is going to be very difficult to figure out over a long period of time. There will be patterns likely established over an extended period, but to say we know for certain right now is just not accurate. The last one that I worry about here a little bit is that, COVID taught us that supply chains are pretty delicate. And when you start adding tariffs to that mix, now again, we're not in a COVID environment right now, but when you start adding tariffs to saying, hey, we need to figure out where we're going to source our goods from, and how much is this going to cost, and how much can I pass on, and where can I resource this from if that's too costly, it just creates disruptions in the supply chain that can kind of relay itself to areas that you don't anticipate. And so that's the unforeseen consequence that I think I worry most about, is how much does this disrupt supply chains to where that price inflation could get out of hand again, or we stop getting the goods that we need and we don't get serviced in the way we expect before, and consumers start to pull back. There's a lot of different variables in that. We just have to be cautious and understand that that is open for debate at this point right now. So with all that said, let's just finalize with, hey, what do we do? That's always the most important. That's usually what people want to know. What I would say is this little cartoon that we put together is absolutely accurate. It's a moving target right now. Chasing it and trying to make forecasted decisions and portfolio and adjustments and really chasing that, if chasing those headlines, going to be very difficult to do, because as I just said, Mexico just got delayed by a month. That happened less than an hour ago, so these kinds of things can happen from time to time. And we have to understand that trading the headlines is probably not going to create any less volatility. And it's probably going to create more problems and trading on emotion rather than trading on anything of sound, concrete knowledge. So I would say assess your personal risk over what the headlines would suggest. Understand where you are, understand where your portfolio sits. Are you balanced in the proper risk fashion? Do you have some elements of protection, but do you also have elements of upside participation? Just understanding your situation and getting that together is probably the most likely and best course of action for you. The last 2 points kind of go together is focus on what you can control, right? From a perspective of there are things that you aren't going to be able, you're not going to have a substantial say in tariff policy. To focus on what you can control. There are other elements of your portfolio and your risk solutions and what you use to invest your money and what you're investing for that you can control. And there are things you can do to take advantage of opportunities and also protect yourself from potential declines. So focus on those things rather than focusing on those headlines. And lastly, we've said it many times, is bring an umbrella. Bring an umbrella does not mean it's going to rain outside. This is not necessarily a thunderstorm, right? This is a potential thunderstorm. There is certainly some potential that this could slow global growth, cause a potential recession. All that stuff is on the table. But understanding that it may not actually happen, right? Is that doom and gloom is not a strategy. But bringing an umbrella focuses your portfolio around having some protection elements, but also participating if the sun stays out and the skies are still blue. All you did was carry a little bit of an umbrella. That's okay. You didn't stay home. You went out, you did what you had to do, but you were protected in case the weather changed on you. So that's what we want to do, and that's what we suggest going forward. With that said, thank you very much for joining us. I hope this was helpful. Tune in next time if we have a special report, or frankly, talk to our podcast or any other of the content that we come out. As more information comes, we will relay it through there. Thank you very much. Take care.